forward.
We're at the People's House of Idaho, and the power of government to take a human life is the one thing that none of us here want to give the government.
So many faith organizations, civil rights organizations, and individual Idahoans are here standing in opposition to this execution.
Life is not ours to take or to end.
We stand here once again to protest the action of the state and its use of the barbaric system of the death penalty.
We're now in the Idaho State Capitol. We're going to go into the governor's office, ask to be heard, and share our petition and our demand that they halt this execution.
It's just amazing the number of people that have come out in support at various churches and elsewhere. We hope to have a really good turnout tomorrow to our last chance to oppose the execution of Thomas Creech.
I'm a clergy in the United Methodist Church, and this morning I'm gathered with a group of clergy and laity to protest the execution of Thomas Creech.
This didn't solve anything. This didn't help anything. Just thinking today of all the victims and just praying for the whole process.
First, I'd like to express my deep gratitude for Abe and Suzanne for coming out and organizing us and helping us to get our heads around what this means in our society and in our community.
So death penalty action comes wherever we need to go to support local abolitionists who want to stand up and lift their voices to oppose executions. It's an honor for us to have groups like the ACLU and the United Methodist Church and others ask us to come and help them. And that's what we do. We help lift up the voices of people who want to say no to executions. Welcome, everybody. And thank you for joining us for another episode of The Forecast, our monthly, normally on the first Sunday of the month, which we are on today, our monthly look at upcoming executions. And of course, it is about to get busy. Sadly, we have 3 scheduled executions in June, and more in July, and more in August, and more in September. Currently, 8 that we're aware of are set. We opened tonight with the video that we made after the almost execution of Thomas Creech in Idaho, which would have been that state's first execution, and the first execution in over a decade, I should say, which was back in February, I think. And as and the latest news there, of course, is that the state has procured more drugs with which to carry out executions. So we are anticipating another date to be set for Thomas Creech, possibly also for Gerald Pizzuto. There's a few other people, although none are expected to get dates there. But the point is, after about a 7-week hiatus, we're now back in the business of executions and opposing executions. So great. We're grateful that you're all here. And tonight we've got guests from that are connected to each of the upcoming executions in June. So we're going to start, of course, with Missouri. And Michelle Smith is here, the co-director of Missourians Against the Death Penalty. Michelle, welcome and thank you for joining us. And we're also going to talk to Reverend Jeff Hood in a few minutes. But first, Michelle, let's talk about the case and what is happening in Missouri. I know that you're planning a petition delivery on June 6th, and we're all working hard to ramp up the petition signatures and all that. But tell us what's the focus for Missourians Against the Death Penalty on this? How can people be helpful?
Well, first, Abe, thank you very much for allowing us to be here tonight and to speak about yet another tragedy that's happening in Missouri on June 11th, which is not far away, about 10 days away. The state will execute David Holger. And right now, as always, our work in Missouri is to amplify the humanity of the people who are facing execution. I'm also pleading with our governor to show mercy in this case, as in all cases, and to also, reach out to our community over the state as well as nationally to gain not only support, but really, just getting the word out, getting these cases amplified. People don't understand that our country executes people so much. It's just not something that is on the news as much as it should be, et cetera. So really talking to people and getting the word out, which will trickle up to our elected officials. And that's another aspect of our work right now. So Elise and I, and mostly Elise, has been in contact with Mr. Hojar's attorney. And like you said, Reverend Hood has also been in contact with David himself. And some weeks ago, David was actually sick. He has some issues with his heart. I believe they said he had congestive heart failure. So he is back in the prison today. And the state is, at this moment carrying on with what they're going to do. But there is still court filings. His attorney filed a petition, a clemency petition recently with the governor's office. In a moment, I will actually link it in the chat. And it's a story that is both sad but also familiar. David, as a young person at 16, had a tragedy in his life. Like so many people on death row experience tragedies when their children are in their youth. And this tragedy really determined the rest of his life. David's father, Glenn, was a Indiana State Trooper, and he was killed tragically in the line of duty. And that really devastated David because they were so close. And again, that set the trajectory for his whole life. But the clemency application is very moving. I read it a few days ago when we received it, and it really just goes through how this person had an amazing home life until such a horrible tragedy struck. And at that time, when this happened back in the 70s, there were no services available for families like David and his mom and his sisters. So, we see the same situation, a horrible tragedy in someone's youth, and just this journey to getting to where, horrible things happen in their life, and then they ultimately commit a horrible crime. So David's story is, again, sad and very familiar. But we will, like I said, keep reaching out to community, keep asking people to sign a petition, which I believe is a clemency for David. And also, your petition as well. And we will go to the Capitol on the 6th of June, which is Thursday, I believe. And we're going to drop the petition off. We're also going to try to have, more people call our governor. Right now, our legislative session is out, so there's not a lot of people at our Capitol, but we will be going and we'll be asking people at home to call and email Governor Parson to implore him to show David some mercy.
And will there be a delivery to the Capitol? No, it'll be to the governor's office, right?
Yes, so we go to the governor's office, and normally when we go there, we have some support. The Catholic Conference is, I guess they're kind of headquartered in that area, so they always come out. So we have faith leaders come out, people of faith, and we delivered a petition to the governor. Last time, one of our amazing elected representatives, Representative Kimberly Ann Collins, joined us, and she helped us to deliver the petition for Mr. Dorsey. So, but like I said, right now, session is out, so there won't be a lot of elected leaders there, and there won't be a lot of hustle or bustle, but we will go to the governor's office and deliver the petition, and we will continue asking the public in our community to reach out to Governor Parson as well.
Okay, and I will share that I guess it was on Friday or Thursday, the clemency petition was filed, or at least there was a video. I put a link to the video for the clemency. The clemency video is in the chat, so folks can watch that. It's about 22 minutes long, so we're not going to show it right now. But y'all can watch that. The link is there, and Ali, if you could put that into the link on the Death Penalty Action Facebook page, then, and of course we'll be adding that to our petition as well, and I'm sure it's up on your page, Michelle. So and we've got a link. Yes, there's a link in the chat here on the Zoom to the MADP Missourians against the death penalty webpage. Excuse me, madpmo.org. We're encouraging people to check that out. Check that out. Take all the actions. They've got a whole kit of things that you can do. MADP is one of the most creative of the state groups in terms of really creating things for lots of different things for people to take, actions for people to take. So take a look at that and use those tools.
Thank you.
Let's bring in Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood. Michelle, is there anything else you want to add before we bring Jeff into the conversation?
Well, with Jeff being here, definitely want to thank him for, being open to connecting with David. I know he and David have had a lot of long conversations and they've gotten pretty close, even though it's only been a few months. And we definitely appreciate Dr. Hood for doing that. Spiritual advisors are very important for people on death row, especially in Missouri, where there was a time where that wasn't something that was allowed. And so now that it is, it's something very important. And we really appreciate Dr. Hood. And we've had some other amazing spiritual advisors. So that is an aspect of, that connection with someone facing execution that is vital to just them even being at peace with what is going on. And so again, I just really want to appreciate Dr. Hood and want to hear from him as well.
Well, thank you. Well, this is Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood is here. It looks like he's outside somewhere tonight. But Jeff, thanks for joining us. And, you are once again the spiritual advisor to somebody about to be executed. And of course, as Michelle had mentioned, David was hospitalized a couple of weeks ago with acute heart failure. And for a moment, we didn't know how that was going to go. He's been stabilized and returned to death row, if I'm correct about that. And you're in touch with him on a daily basis now, right?
Yeah, thanks, Abe. First of all, before I get too far into it, I wanted to thank Michelle and Elise. MADP is an absolutely amazing organization. They do amazing work, not just in terms of quality, quantity, output, all of those sorts of measurements that we tend to rate organizations and institutions by, but even more than that, in that heart work and helping connecting people, folks like myself, with folks on death row, spiritual advisors, families, and Michelle, I just wanted you to know, and I'm sure you'll pass it along to Elise, just how thankful I am for y'all and how much I appreciate y'all in the work of MADP. So with that said, I wanted to also state that I am presently in Oklahoma City. And the reason I'm in Oklahoma City is that we tomorrow are filming a mini documentary, short documentary for Emmanuel Littlejohn, who is on death row here in Oklahoma. The unique thing about his case, and I won't go too far into it, but the unique thing about his case is his is a case in which the prosecutor, it was Emmanuel and another perpetrator who robbed a store together, and on the way out, the clerk was shot and killed. Well, in the trials of both men, the prosecution argued that that man was the shooter. There was only one shooter, but the prosecution got away with arguing at trial that both men were the one shooter. And so now we're sitting here, 31 years later, and the evidence has really sort of proven over time that Emmanuel wasn't the shooter. But we're sitting here 31 years later, one of his co-defendant received a life sentence and Emmanuel received a death sentence. So the documentary that we're making is intended to show the people of Oklahoma that they are about to execute someone who literally has never killed anyone. And so, we catch these cases and these situations that we draw attention to, and that's certainly what we're trying to do here. Switching to David, I'm so thankful for David and our friendship, and part of, I guess, the way that I do this spiritual advising work is that I'll back up and say it like this. I get a lot of questions, what do you do? What does this look like? And I think the shortest, best way I've ever sort of come upon to describe it is that I basically, in the last 3 to 6 months of someone's life, someone who's about to be executed, I become their best friend. And I become their best friend in order to be with them when they're executed. And I think that way of saying it has been so true here with David. We've gotten to a point where we talk, 3 times a day, 2 or 3 times a day. When he had his medical incident, went into heart failure a few weeks ago, we were there connected. And I guess I just say all of this to say that David Hosier is a man capable of incredible good, incredible love, incredible friendship, and such a productive part of my life. And it just baffles me that the state of Missouri is so interested in ending a life that has certainly given me such life in terms of our friendship over the last few months. I also think it's important to make clear that David is very zealous that people know that he says that he is innocent. And he is, in every conversation that he's having right now, he wants people to know that is how he feels about this. And I think that that's important to point out. But I think, as Michelle mentioned, David has had a number of issues throughout his life. His father was killed in the line of duty, Indiana State Patrolman. And, Michelle mentioned there was a lack of services. And one of the things that I've thought about a lot in this case is we have this crowd that is all about backing the blue. We hear that all the time. Back the blue, back the blue. My question has consistently been, how can you back the blue and kill someone whose entire life has been dramatically changed and shifted by the murder of their father on duty? There's always this statement that we want to remember the fallen and the fallen's families and all this types of stuff. And my, exhortation to Governor Parson and the state of Missouri is, how can you say that you're taking care of the fallen and execute the son of a fallen officer? I'll also say quickly, David did a long tour in the Navy, worked at the Pentagon. He was a firefighter. There's all sorts of things about David in which he has given to the state of Missouri, to our country. And, like a lot of situations, this is complicated. It's very complicated. But at the same time, what is not complicated is that David is 70 years old. He is no threat to anyone, no possible threat to anyone. And it makes absolutely no sense to spend state resources, to spend the emotional energy to create a tragedy for even more families to execute this man. I can tell you that in the coming weeks, I will be standing with David, and I will be there with Michelle and them as they deliver the petitions. I guess later on this week, and I just ask everyone who's on the call tonight to pray for David. I mean, I know that we've got a lot of different perspectives. people coming from a lot of different religious traditions, but I do believe in the power of prayer, the power of putting good out so that David will know that you're thinking about him. You're praying for him. You're lifting him into the light, lifting him to God. And I guess I will close by simply saying that, David is a child of God. And if David is executed, he will be the seventh child of God that I have seen executed in the last 18 months. And every time I leave the chamber, I can't help but think, this didn't have to happen. We don't have to do this. This didn't have to happen. We don't have to do this. I hope that the rest of our country, the state of Missouri, will come to that conclusion as well.
Thank you, Jeff. Michelle, is there anything further you want to add about David Hosier and how people can be helpful to you in Missouri?
Well, I did want to appreciate you and Allie for putting the links in the chat for the petition and also for the clemency video. I am always very moved by Dr. Hood's just his willingness to be in those chambers with people who are facing execution. I'm sure it's not an easy task at all. It's not easy for us to be outside, so I'm sure it's not easy to be inside. And I wanted to just pick up on one thing that you said about how and this is something I talk about too. Executing people does not fix anything. It does not stop the next person from doing something. It does not, make the family feel better because they are still grieving for a loved one. And in this country, a long time ago, they created prisons, and they created prisons for people who commit a crime to remove them from society. And so when I talk to people, I tell them we have a solution for people that have done things like David, like other people. We also know people are innocent, but right now I just want to focus specifically on just if somebody, has been proven guilty and the evidence leans that way. Prison exists, right? People can live in that environment and do the best they can to become better people. If that's taking mental health classes, seeing, their doctors and making sure that they're taking their medication or making sure that they are doing what they need to do. Even I know people that are mentors to other younger people, who are incarcerated. So there is a place for everybody, even inside of our prisons. And we believe that we don't need executions because there is a place and there is a solution for when someone commits a crime. And we've had this place. Often when I talk to people about my work, they talk to me like if no death penalty existed, people would just be out, out in the society. And I'm like, no, prison is still there, right? Even if we didn't have a death penalty, prison is still there. So we really need to talk to people about what benefit executions give our society, and there is none. Be it the cost, the grief, the trauma, also the trauma of the people inside, the officers. I know in Oklahoma, not long ago, they asked the state to slow down how many people they wanted to execute because it was every month for a moment. And that was too much even on the guards who are supposed to be carrying out, the execution day. So even talking about the staff of the prison, this is a very traumatic thing that our society imposes upon everyone. And it is not hard to get rid of it. So I definitely implore people to, take whatever actions they can, be it doing a clemency campaign with signing and sharing, but also talk to your own elected officials. Talk to them about if they are supporting the death penalty, why, and bring the statistics, and I'm sure you all have statistics, and we do too, about how this is a system that capital punishment does not fix anything. So I definitely want people to keep amplifying these issues, keep talking to elected officials and keep talking to their own community members. So I'll just leave it at that. But thank you so much, Abe.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and especially for pointing all of that out. One of the things that people in our line of work often have to do is find ourselves, justifying what we do and why we do it, and then facing dismissal for, you just care about these murderers and that sort of thing. And of course, yes, we do care about everybody as people, but I also find it important to remind people that most of the people who are encountering this issue have no connection to the death penalty. They've never lost a loved one to murder. They don't know what any of this feels like. They don't even necessarily know anything about what incarceration is. And, from a death penalty action point of view, we find it as, our main focus is find the people. We're not here to change anybody's minds. We're here to find the people that agree with us and give them something to do to help change the world on this issue. And if in the course of that, we're able to help people change their minds on the issue, and I come at it as a person who used to be in favor of the death penalty. And, the thing that changed my mind was just learning about the unfairness of it. I used to say, if we could kill them all, but since we don't, and since we pick this tiny little percentage of those who are even death eligible, that's not acceptable. And of course, where my mind got changed was on the facts and the unfairness. Where my heart got changed was learning about the collateral damage and how this impacts the families of the people that are facing execution, and everybody, including, as Michelle just mentioned, the people who are traumatized by having it be their job to carry out executions. So I'm going to talk about all of that, but I think it's also important when we're finding people that are challenging us to be able to say also, life without the possibility of parole is the wrong name. Really what it is death by incarceration. And nobody is suggesting that people should be tortured in prison. Well, there are those who do suggest that, but we're not suggesting that. But let's just look at the harsh reality that when it's a capital case, people are facing a death penalty. They're either going to get, if they're convicted, death or death by execution or death by incarceration. And just helping people wake up to that reality that prison is no picnic. It's an awful place to be. It's especially an awful place to be if you are sick or if you are old. And and we have changed legislators' minds and gotten them to vote to abolish the death penalty because for them, they wanted what was worse. And once they came to understand that death by incarceration was worse, that's what they wanted. I don't want it to be worse, but I do want legislators to change their votes and vote to abolish the death penalty. And that's a stepping stone in that regard. Anyway, enough of that. Thank you so much, Michelle. Stick around if you want to, and feel free to comment further. But we're going to move to the next case, which is, and I see, Jeff, you have unmuted yourself, but we're going to talk about Oklahoma next and Richard Rojum. So, Jeff, go ahead.
Well, I was about to jump off, but quickly on Richard Rojum, I wanted to say that I had the pleasure about a couple of weeks ago of talking to his spiritual advisor. Richard is Buddhist, and his spiritual advisor is in California, an older Buddhist monk, and it was really beautiful to talk to someone who of a different faith, but also someone who is of the same faith, and that faith being love, and loving these guys and working hard for these guys. So anyways, I wanted to just quickly say that, but I need to go. My kids are in the swimming pool, but I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Thank you for caring about David and all the other guys, and I will catch up with everybody later. Thanks, Abe.
Thank you, Jeff, and we'll talk later about what's going on in Oklahoma and what you're up to. So thank you for doing that. Here we go. Yeah, we're back. So, Allie, who do we have here? Is that Lynn that's connected with Richard?
Yeah, it's Caitlin and Lynn. They're both good friends of Richard. Caitlin suggested that maybe Lynn goes first, so I just wanted to invite Lynn up and give us a quick overview of Richard's case and how you got connected with him and just your friendship with him.
Well, welcome, Lynn Christofferson, and please introduce yourself. And
well done. My name is Lynn Christofferson, and I sent a Christmas card a very generic Christmas card to Rick Daiji, as I call him, 5.5 years ago, and we found a lot in common. I'm a Benedictine Oblate. He is a Bodhisattva in the Buddhist religion. We've both taken vows, and we found that journey, we're forming deep roots, and they intertwine. So, and I will concur that Abbot Daishin is going to be with him in the execution chamber, and his teacher, Reverend Enya, will be in the witness room. Couple of kind of troubling things about what's happened is I think Michelle referenced the change in Oklahoma on the spacing between executions, and that decision came down from the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals on the 17th of May, that they would indeed space executions out 90 days instead of 60 days. And this was in spite of one of the judges involved in this decision telling DOC employees that they should suck it up, they should man up and just do their job. That's the kind of atmosphere that we're dealing with. Daiji found out that his date had been set that same evening on the news. I can't imagine what that was like for him. And the problem is that only is giving his lawyer and all of his supporters about 40 days to work on trying to get clemency for him. His clemency hearing is set for June the 17th at 9 o'clock in the morning. His lawyer's working very hard on that. We've been getting letters of support for him. And then that only gives the governor 10 days to make his decision before the execution date of June 27th. A couple of things that really troubled me about his case. Daiji has always said he was innocent. In fact, he points out that he refused a plea deal at the time of his trial because he felt he was innocent and he wanted to go to trial and be proven innocent. All of the evidence against him is circumstantial. His DNA from the evidence has been tested 3 times now and has not included any of his DNA. Unfortunately, what's happened is his lawyer was trying to get another test. I'm not real familiar with some of this stuff, but touch DNA, which is supposed to be very, very sensitive. And the piece of evidence they were going to use has disappeared. It seems to have gotten lost, being transported from OSBI to a sheriff's office. I'm not real clear on that, but I think this kind of goes to the point of here in Oklahoma in 2017, we had a very extensive bipartisan, all the stakeholders spent a year studying the death penalty in Oklahoma and how it was administered, and they came up with an Oklahoma death penalty review with like 49 recommendations. Absolutely nothing has been done on that, and there's a big piece of it that addresses this whole issue of forensics and a requirement to be really diligent about keeping everything available, even 60 days after someone has died or been executed. I said that I found Daiji Rick to be on a very deep spiritual journey. Daiji is well, I'll let Caitlin talk about that, but my experience of him is that he has changed lives. Just the other day when I was talking to him, there was some confusion. The warden in the facility had said that the guys on A unit who were death sentenced could go on to the big yard, but it hadn't happened. The word hadn't gotten down. And the warden was talking to Daiji when she was doing her 35-day, let's get all this paperwork done. He pointed out that nobody was getting out on the big yard, and she said she'd do something about that and make sure he got out onto the big yard too. And he said, no, I don't want to get out in the big yard. My friends are on the little yard, but I want these other guys to be able to do that. And you need to know that's not happening. Just always looking out for the next guy. He will leave a huge hole in many people's hearts if he should be executed. And that's kind of where I'd like to turn it over to Caitlin now, if that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm.
There you are.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. That was kind of all this stuff that I was like, I need Lynn to like really play all this out, because like I can tell you he's been, I've known Daiji. He and I met the same way Lynn did. I sent Christmas cards as well, only about 3 years after she did. We've been friends about 2.5 years now. But I don't remember where I was going with that. But anyway, kind of like Lynn said, this has been bumped so much. He's been there longer than I've been alive. I'm 36 years old. And we were looking at this happening in October. His attorney's office had just spoken with the DA about a week before this all, the date got set, and they were looking at October, and they were like, well, that October doesn't even sound right with the 90 days. It should be September, but cool, that's great. And then, a week later, he finds out on the news that, we're looking at June 27th. So my husband and I actually live in Florida now. We're both from Oklahoma, but so we're kind of like trying to figure out travel arrangements. His spiritual advisors are trying to figure out travel arrangements from California, and it's all this big mess because we've got, kind of like Lynn said, barely 40 days even to figure anything out, much less even trying to sort out clemency and all of the details of this case that are all over the place. Like Lynn said, missing evidence and DNA, and he's refused all of the plea bargains that were offered to him and all of these things over the years. But, I think my biggest thing that I wanted to talk about, I wanted Lynn to kind of get into all that because she had it all written down. And I was like, man, I'd have to go through so many emails at this point to track it all down. But, as she said, we all call him Daiji. That's the name that his masters and teachers gave him, and it means great compassion. And that is something that he exemplifies better than anyone I've ever met. I could go into, he talks us off a ledge. I mean, Lynn and I have even discussed this. He's more worried about all of us and this whole thing than himself. I keep telling him like over and over, it's okay. Like you can say like, this sucks because like, this sucks. Like if you need to sit and vent it out, like we're here to listen. Like you don't have to baby us through this. Like we want to baby you too. And, he's so much more worried about the rest of us going through this and us being there and all of that. But he cares so much about all of us and about our kids and our family and Lynn's grandkids and just all of us. We've all kind of become his family. My husband adopted I have an 11-year-old, and he adopted her back in December, and it cost us thousands of dollars because legal fees are astronomical. And he refused to let me say no and mailed us his only $11.56 to contribute to our adoption fees. Like that's the kind of person that he is. Yeah. The state executing him is doing nothing but harm. But even aside from the fact that we're all convinced and, he's never wavered on his innocence. He's always said he was innocent. Even if he wasn't innocent, it's serving no purpose to execute him at this point. They just fixed his heart. Lynn, maybe 2 weeks ago, he had his second stent put in. So he went to the heart hospital, had a stent put in, got, some good meal, got a pizza, had, he sat the nurses down and told them how grateful he was. But it's like, we spent money from the state to go fix his heart. And now we're going to go stop it in 30 days from now. It doesn't make any sense. This is a person that just loves, he just loves, I did my first ever sermon for my church. My pastor asked me to speak a few months ago, and I couldn't not speak about this person that has affected my life so much. And that's kind of one thing I mentioned, is he was one of the first person I told him, sent him an email and was like, hey, my pastor asked me to speak. Like, it's about this. Like, what do you get from this? And like, one of his big things was, you love with all your being, you don't hate with all your being. Like, we're taught to hate. We're not, we're not born learning or knowing how to hate. We're born knowing how to love. And just, that's something that he shows us every single day. So, like Lynn said, if he is executed, it's going to leave a huge hole for a lot of us that have grown to really, really, love him and appreciate his wisdom and his guidance and his zenness. And, even with, I'm sure you guys have dealt with some of the Securus nightmare lately that has all their down things. And Lynn and I have been talking back and forth. I'm like, I don't understand why this is happening now of all the times. She's like, we know what he would say to us. Like, he would tell us, take a deep breath and chill out. It's all fine, So we've kind of like at least been able to, like, some of the people that love him have been able to bond and kind of like deal with that. But the next few weeks are going to be tough, and we're all kind of waiting. We're still waiting on visitation information. We still haven't, none of us have been approved yet to be in the witness chamber or even to visit at this point. We don't know if we're going to be able to visit before or when. We're also kind of like dealing with planning, and it's been stressful, but that's kind of where we're at.
Well, thank you both. And I want to just add, did Lynn disappear? There she is.
No, I'm here.
Just, thank you both for doing this and for connecting with Allie and being on the program with us tonight to give us a sense of who Daiji, am I saying that right? Is who he is. I really didn't know too much about the case, mainly because, when Oklahoma set 25 executions dates at one time 2 years ago, the way death penalty action really has to function is we take whoever's next in line, and that's where the focus is. That's where the focus is. But I did want to mention that you talked about, Lynn, you talked about the Death Penalty Study Commission. I put a link to that in the chat, both on the Facebook page and the Zoom. And
thank you.
And that spells out all these issues. I also wanted to share my screen real quick and just show people, what we've created with this petition. So this is the front page of deathpenaltyaction.org. And if you just scroll down past those initial campaigns, you can see here's the upcoming executions, and you click on the one for Richard. And you can see, unfortunately, if any of you have a better picture than what we get from the state, do send that, because we prefer not to share that. But this comes from, there's a webpage at the Initiative Hope for Life. It's a German group that organized with, and they have been in touch with Daiji for a long time, and they actually published his words. So that's where we got that. And you can go and read all that yourself. But I wanted to just share it. That's where you go to find that connection. And of course, hopefully, the other thing I wanted to mention was the reason you talked about only 40 days notice. The reason that they were able to move all that up is because Wade Lay was supposed to be executed this week or next week, something like that, early in June. And because he was taken off the schedule, suddenly they could back it up to the execution of Michael Smith. It was at the beginning of April. So April, May, June, July, so that's how that kind of got expedited. And we're waiting any time now for them to set the next dates in Oklahoma. And they're chomping at the bit to do that. So that's how all that figured out. Lynn, go ahead. You're muted.
I just wanted to say part of the decision was they would not set the next execution date until the execution happened, instead of lining up in phases like they had done before. They decided that created too many problems with, if something happens, legal things. So they won't set the next date until after.
Well, that is I had not heard that
execution.
interpretation yet, but what I understood, and thank you for that, because
It's in the,
understood is they
yeah,
can only set one at a time. They can't say we're doing all these six, which is how they had been setting them up.
no,
So
yeah,
if that's the case,
not doing phases.
yeah, that is well, that needs everybody to look at a 90-day notice. Michelle, you had something you wanted to add?
I do have something I wanted to add really quick, Abe. I heard you all talking about Daji's innocence claims, and also, as Jeff said earlier, David Hosier also claims to be innocent. So I kind of wanted to talk about, being innocent in the death penalty for a moment. I think that, of course, most people on death row, as well as family members and some organizers, we look at innocence as this pinnacle of, well, if you're innocent, the system is not going to kill this person or kill me or kill my family member. It's simply not true, right? It's just not. And now it should be true.
Yeah.
We should not be killing innocent
Yeah.
people. That should be the bare minimum, right? Even when we talk about mitigation or, childhood traumas, et cetera, our bare minimum should be, we shouldn't be killing innocent people. But this society, this country does. And I just looked up the stats to make sure I had it correctly. According to DPIC, which is Death Penalty Information Center, at least 197 innocent people have been exonerated from death row. So those are the people that some great attorneys and some great folks, were able to push and get them exonerated from death row. It's 197. But also, when we look at people actually executed, for every 8 executions we have in this country, it's estimated one of those people were innocent. So innocence does not stop this country, this state, these states, this system from executing someone. And I know, like in our client David's case, he does, he says he's innocent, and technically I wasn't there, right? But with the way his case panned out and the evidence that was presented, his attorneys felt like pushing forth an innocence claim would not be the best avenue to take, and they took another route, and that was their decision. But when we look at innocence, even in Missouri 2 years ago, in February of 23, this state executed Leonard Raheem Taylor. Leonard was, there was proof he was innocent. There was actually some alibi witnesses and other proof that he was innocent. We also have a man named Marcellus Williams on death row in Missouri. 2 DNA tests have proved that Marcellus was not the killer. Our governor and our AG is still trying today to set an execution date for him. So being innocent is not that, that pedestal. It should be, but it's currently not. And that is something we need to work for. But I always tell people, when we look at, this person's innocent, and we kind of our guard and assume that the system is not, reality. That's not what actually happens. This country, this system kills innocent people often. At least, of the number of executions we've had, 1 of every 8 have been innocent, right? Or estimated to have been innocent. So it is not a perfect system whatsoever. And innocence is not the pinnacle that it should be. And that is another, frustration that we all have. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Thank you for that. And and with Raheem and with so many others, and we talk about this every time. If you go back and watch our program or our vigil from the other night, when they executed Jamie Mills in Alabama, Rob Dunham was on from the Death Penalty Policy Project, and he was explaining this quandary that we seem to be talking about very, very often, which is the issue of procedural bars and the idea that you're this far along and therefore it's too late to even entertain. And the same year that Raheem was executed in 2022, we also had at least 3 other cases where there was evidence of innocence or malfeasance, or in the case of one person in Texas, turned out that the jury foreperson was articulating herself as a racist in the middle of the deliberations for this, whether or not this person should be executed. And guilty or not, it's unconstitutional to have bias like that in your jury. So, but they're allowed to go forward. And that's where the challenge is. And that's why it's so important that all of us are doing what we're doing, and we're speaking out, that everybody is signing the petitions, that we show up and deliver those petitions, that we raise as much of a fuss as we can, and we shine a spotlight on these things, because as I've said in the past, every time one of these executions happens, there's always something, some form of injustice within it, whether the person is guilty of the crime that they were convicted of or not. There's always some injustice, and we have to highlight every single time. And when we do, more people hear about it and at least come to recognize that we can't trust government with the power to kill, and the system is broken, and therefore the death penalty should be done away with. So that's kind of the path that we're on, and it's the thing we have to just keep hammering. So, Alan, did you have something?
No, I was just waiting for us to get to Ramiro.
Okay, well, Lynn and Caitlin, I hope and pray that somehow you are able to get approved for visits and to be present. We will be standing in solidarity with you and others to the extent possible if this execution goes forward. And let's be real, it's entirely likely that this is going to happen on schedule. Of course, we will be having a live virtual vigil. If you can't be in the prison, then we welcome you to be a part of that. And of course, we'll also make sure, we've already made sure there will be a vigil outside the prison. And we'll continue to encourage people there. There are multiple vigils that happen around Oklahoma, most notably at the governor's mansion. And by the way, if you are in Oklahoma the day before, so we'll deliver the petitions to the parole board the morning of the parole board hearing, which, as you said, is June 17th. So we've got until then to ramp up the signatures for Daiji, and then we'll do it again prior to the day before the execution. If the governor, of course, the governor in Oklahoma can't grant a commutation of sentence without a recommendation of the parole board. So assuming that the parole board gives a good recommendation, then it's going to be all hands on deck under the governor. And if he still hasn't acted by the day before the execution, then we'll do an in-person delivery at 4 p.m., gathering outside the governor's office at 3:45 p.m. So that's kind of the schedule that we have worked out in Oklahoma in terms of these things. So we're grateful. Lynn, you had something you wanted to add? You're muted. That's what, no? Okay. There she's gone. All right. So with that, is there any other thoughts on the Oklahoma execution? Then we'll move on to the other, actually, normally we would have done that one first. Ramiro Gonzalez is scheduled to be executed the day before, the evening before. And Allie, I know, is going to be down there, as well as Britton Buchanan and a number of other people. And in last month on this program, on the forecast, we did have a conversation about Ramiro. So we'll update you again now about the issues of that case. And for that, Allie has been in close contact with Ramiro for several years now. And Allie, fill us in, please.
Sure. Well, real quick, before we get to Ramiro, Sandra had a question, and she wanted to know if any more death penalty states agreed on using nitrogen hypoxia for upcoming executions. I know that there's been some legislation coming and going the last few months. So do you mind just updating us on that real quick, Abe?
Sure. Thank you for that, Sandra. And I was going to talk about that after this, but I'll just fill us in now. So there are 4 states that had legislation this current session. Nebraska, where it's been halted. They had a committee hearing and nobody voted to move the bill forward in Nebraska. Same thing happened in Kansas. There was a committee hearing and they didn't vote on it. They never voted on it. That is essentially dead at this point. In Louisiana, unfortunately, in January, I think it was, or February, there was a special session of the legislature essentially to reverse all of the criminal justice reform stuff that happened in Louisiana under the previous governor. so among the things that they did there was add in the possibility of execution by gas suffocation, which is what it really is. When they call it nitrogen hypoxia, that's not what it is. It's suffocation using gas to replace oxygen. Or to, in any case, that bill passed. There was a legislator, once they got into the regular session, who introduced a bill to remove that. And that bill actually passed in the Senate, and then was halted a couple of weeks ago in the House Criminal Justice Committee. So Louisiana is not expected to jump right into gas suffocation executions, mainly because they have lethal injection, and who knows if they have the drugs, but we're going to find out, because with this governor, there was a big campaign prior to the election to try to get commutations, and the previous governor tried to commute the people on the sentences of the people on Louisiana's death row, and he was halted by the district attorneys, one of whom now became the governor, and we anticipate execution dates being set in Louisiana after July 1st. So that's the situation there. And lastly is Ohio, which the day after January 25th, when we had the first gas suffocation execution in Alabama, there was a press conference announced in Ohio, and the Ohio Attorney General and several legislators announced legislation to bring executions by gas suffocation into Ohio. That bill has now had a proponent hearing, and we have reasonable intelligence to expect that opponent testimony will be taken not this week, but next week. And we'll be able to confirm that once the hearing is actually set, which we anticipate happening in the next few days. So that's kind of where that's at. Now, it's important to know in Ohio, where there's more than 30 execution dates pending, none of those should be considered to be real dates, so long as Governor Mike DeWine is governor. As Attorney General, he did all he could to move executions forward, but as governor, he has put on a different hat, and basically, as a committed, consistently pro-life Catholic, that's not his justification. His justification is we can't get the drugs. But really what he's doing is making sure that no executions happen in Ohio. Now, if we can't pass our bill to repeal the death penalty, and Governor DeWine somehow leaves office early or is replaced in the next election, we don't know what's going to happen unless we abolish the death penalty in Ohio, which is a big maybe. Right now, we feel like we have the votes in Ohio. However, this is the most unproductive General Assembly in Ohio in decades, and it has nothing to do with our issue. It's all infighting among the Republicans because of shenanigans that have happened. So we'll see where all that goes. But that's your status on nitrogen gas suffocation executions. Mississippi has the possibility, but they also have lethal injection. Oklahoma has the possibility, but they also have been doing just fine with their lethal injections. Of course, Arizona has an actual gas chamber using Zyklon B or cyanide. That's only available to the people who were sentenced to death prior to 1992. I think there's 15 or 16 of them left. And a heads up that the Attorney General of Oklahoma actually announced a week ago that she expects that executions will resume in Arizona in 2025. So we'll see where all that goes. Meanwhile, there's also some challenges about the question of how they're getting the drugs. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's kind of the status of where we are with the method of execution. I will add also in South Carolina, you have any day now, we're waiting for the Supreme Court of South Carolina to make its determination as to whether the electric chair and firing squad are constitutional under the South Carolina Constitution. If they decide that those methods of execution are constitutional, then you can expect a number of execution dates to be set in South Carolina right away. So we'll see where all that goes. I think that answers the question, probably more than you were looking for. So Allie, tell us about Ramiro.
Thanks, Abe. Hold on. Perfect. So not much has changed in Ramiro's situation since this program last month. The biggest issue in Ramiro's case is he does not meet the fundamental criteria to be executed in Texas. A little history lesson. Back in 1972, the US Supreme Court shot down all death penalty schemes in the country because they were arbitrarily imposed. Each of the justices felt differently and had different arguments, but the fact of the matter is the death penalty is arbitrary. 4 years and 4 days later, the US Supreme Court upheld new death penalty statutes that were supposed to fix that problem. Every single one of the 35 states, except Texas and Oregon, opted for a weighing scheme where they would be able to introduce mitigating evidence. Texas and Oregon copied Texas, did not use a weighing scheme. They created a 3-question scheme. One of the main questions was if the inmate or if the defendant would pose a future threat to society, future dangerousness. And we know that that is literally impossible to accurately predict 10, 15, 20, 30 years in advance. And at Ramiro's trial, the doctor who testified to future dangerousness said he would absolutely be a future threat, and that satisfied all the criteria, and the jury imposed a death sentence on Ramiro. 2 years ago, when Ramiro had his previous death sentence or previous execution date, goodness gracious, I can't talk tonight. They found the doctor who testified at his trial, and the doctor now said that Ramiro has clearly shown that he's not a future threat and he should be allowed to live. And all of us who know Ramiro know that that is absolutely true. When Caitlin and Lynn were talking about DIG, I was thinking a lot about Ramiro because it felt like a lot of what they were saying echoes how those of us who know Ramiro feel about him, and that he is absolutely a reformed person, and he has so much love to give, and he cares so much about the people around him. And Ramiro and I talked about this a lot during leading up to his last execution date, but he has just found a whole new appreciation for life. And in that new appreciation, he is trying to do everything he can to meaningfully atone for the horrible crime he committed in 2001. And he recognizes he can't bring Bridget Townsend back, but he's trying to do what he can to give other people a new chance at life. And during his last execution date, the big issue then was Ramiro wanted to donate one of his kidneys before lethal injection rendered his organs unviable. He couldn't bring Bridget back, but he wanted to give somebody else the ability to have a new chance at life. And it went back and forth between the state and Ramiro's attorneys, and ultimately it kind of ended like in a dud, and Ramiro is not able to donate his kidney, and that issue is not really relevant anymore now. However, so the future dangerousness issue is the big thing at play right now. I have not seen anything from his attorneys to suggest that there are other issues currently being argued and narratives that are being argued. So right now it's just that Texas is literally not respecting their own death penalty scheme to ensure Ramiro's execution. And last time he had an execution date during the summer of 2022, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals actually stopped his execution 2 days before. They issued a stay of execution 2 days before he was supposed to be executed because of this very issue. And when that happens, that issue is usually sent back to the local county, in this case, Medina County. And even though nothing has changed in his case, Medina County basically just rubber stamped his case and allowed the execution to go through again, even though he still does not meet that fundamental criteria. The doctor still believes he's not a future threat to society, and he's shown that he's not a threat to society. And so it's extremely frustrating to me to see Texas not even following their own their own law that they wrote. And I would argue that Texas's death penalty scheme makes it easier for them to impose death sentences than in other states because there is no requirement of mitigating evidence. And I don't know, Ramiro he's such a sweetheart. He really does care about those around him. And Lynn and Caitlin were talking about how Daiji was more concerned about the people around him than himself. And that's very much true for Ramiro as well. He was telling me the other day on the phone that he feels like he's trying to comfort his family and his friends. And I can't imagine being in that position. I've had so many nightmares about being executed over the last few years, and to be in that position and still show so much strength and being able to comfort those around you, it's a miracle, I think. And I don't know how many people could be in that position and show the strength that Ramiro has and that Daiji has. And it's really devastating. If we lose Ramiro, it is going to leave a huge hole in many of our hearts. And I mentioned this last time, so I'm not going to go on it too much, but Ramiro was best friends with my friend Casol, who was executed 2 years ago. That's Casol right there. And so for me, keeping Ramiro alive to an extent feels like a part of Casol is still alive too, because they spent before their last execution date, they were pretty much the longest serving people on Texas's death watch ever in history. Ramiro served nearly 2 years on death watch and Casol nearly a year and a half. And so they became really close because for much of that time, they were the only two people there. So they would spend their recreation time together. They would always talk and they became really close. And I will be, during that last week leading up to Ramiro's execution, I'll be visiting him. But I just wanted to show a picture of Ramiro. This is a picture that he had sent me when him and I first met a couple of years ago. And it's a little bit of an older picture now, but I still just wanted to show people that Ramiro is a real human being, and all these people that we're talking about are real human beings. They have families that love them. They have long histories, and David, we heard about David earlier and the long history that he experienced that ultimately led to his crime and all the trauma and such that he experienced. And all of these crimes, none of these crimes happen in a vacuum. There is so much that goes on in the years leading up to these crimes, and these people are so much more than just that one instant, that one moment, the worst moment of their life and the worst moment of the families of the person that they killed or purportedly killed's lives. And yeah, I don't know how we're gonna get through, quite frankly. Ramiro will be the seventh or eighth person that I've known that was ultimately executed. Some I've been closer than others, but just the fact that Ramiro and Casol, like in my mind, they're always going to be connected. And I haven't been the same since Casol was executed almost 2 years ago. And so I know Ramiro is going to be really tough.
Thank you for that, Allie. And yes, it's going to be difficult, and we're grateful that you are connected in to Ramiro, and you're going to be down there to visit with him, and then be part of the folks outside the prison when that execution goes forward. Nobody here is thinking that that's not going to happen, but miracles do happen, and that's what we're all praying for and working for. So, with that, I think that closes us out for the upcoming executions. I want to share a couple of things that are coming up also. One is we're going to have some good news to report probably in another week or two regarding the Absolute Standards campaign. That's the company that was making drugs for use that were used in the federal executions, and we're not sure, but still trying to sort out exactly if they've sold drugs for purposes of execution to any states. They say they have not. And So that's still working out, but you're going to hear more about that. Might be 2 or 3 more weeks as negotiations are happening. But the good news is that it's the action that many of us took that got them to the table to talk about it with the legislators that were raising the issues with them in Connecticut, where that company is based. So that's good news, and a victory that we will have that you all were a part of. So I'm grateful for that. We're not declaring it yet, just saying you're listening, you're here tonight, you get to hear about that. So that's a new thing that's coming up. Also, I'm going to share my screen real quick and just share with you. Let's see here. So this is, again, the Death Penalty Action webpage, deathpenaltyaction.org. And don't forget to be writing to your members of Congress and to the president. Just have to keep the pressure on them too. We'll be having some more action coming up about the federal campaign shortly. This is where you find our active campaigns and other resources, and including all the other executions that are currently scheduled. We've got petitions for each one of them, and as soon as we can with each case, we of course add new ones. But if you want more cases to look at, these are some of the cases that we're expecting to have execution dates set for, and then these are the postponed ones, and there's lots of work to do. I'm going to jump over though to abolition.org. I've put the link in the chat a couple of times. If you really want a powerful experience, then find yourself in Washington, D.C. For the annual fast and vigil to abolish the death penalty. It's always June 29th to July 2nd. June 29th is the anniversary of the Furman decision. Ali mentioned that in 1972 struck down all the death penalty laws in the country. And July 2nd is the anniversary of the Gregg decision, which upheld the new laws that were then written. Florida had a special session of its legislature in November 1972 just to write a new death penalty law. So, and ever since then, executions have been going on, and we've been doing this protest. Now this will be the 31st annual Fast and Vigil to Abolish the Death Penalty. So that's at abolition.org, and I want you to check that out. I'm also putting a link to the For Whom the Bells Toll campaign. You see the sign over my shoulder here. We opposed the execution this week. This is something that we started up, resurrected after all the execution dates were set in Oklahoma two summers ago. Some folks are really engaged in this every time. If you're this ideally for anybody really, but particularly it's designed for faith communities to be able to, if there's an execution next week, as there will be, then this coming weekend, you put up your sign in the yard or inside. You make sure there's a bulletin announcement to everybody in your community, and you plan to toll your bells at the time of the execution or at some point that day, and tell people why you're doing so. And we had an amazing experience with Georgia, their recent execution, where lots of different communities tolled their bells. Same thing in Idaho when we thought Thomas Creech was being executed, and they were trying. The folks that were vigiling downtown Boise could hear multiple churches tolling their bells. That's kind of the difference about the organizing work we were able to do in Idaho. Was actually, you had bishop level people actively engaged in the campaign to stop that execution. So, the word came from on high. We're going to toll our bells. So this is something that we could do. I just got another box of these. I got 50 of these. And if you would like to have one, if you live in the US, then, just shoot me an email and I'll send you one of these. Same thing if you want to, we just got a resupply of t-shirts. If you want a t-shirt, I've got them in sizes from small up to 5X. And I'll give it to you for free, because that's what's most important, is that people will use these tools to raise awareness and start the conversations in your own communities. Obviously, it's always helpful to have the resources to be able to print more and to be able to give them away. But that's what we do, is we give this stuff away so that to people who say that they will use it. Okay, so you can send me an email, abe@deathpenaltyaction.org, or fill out the forms on the webpage. So let me just show you. I think that, yeah, the other thing I wanted to show you was if you go to For Whom the Bells Toll, this is that webpage where you can sign up. There's also a whole folder where you can download these signs and print them out yourself, or make it your status on your status image on your social media, whatever it is. But we do have a short video to share about this, and then we'll be back to close it out.
Right now, several states across the country are in a mad rush to execute people on death row. With so many lives at stake, communities of faith are standing up in opposition to this continuation of the cycle of violence. There are 3 simple ways communities of faith can help. First, add a special time of prayer during your services prior to a scheduled execution. We ask that you pray for the victim's family, the offender and their family, legal teams, court officials, executioners, and others impacted. Second, toll a bell for 2 minutes on the day of an execution. If you don't have a bell, display a banner or sign showing your opposition to the death penalty. Third, go to our website, forwhomthebellstoll.org, to learn more about our movement, order an action kit unique to your state, and register your participation. We must act now because time is running out for so many men and women on death row. Together, we can abolish the death penalty.
Yeah. So that's that campaign. You're all invited to participate. Lastly, I'll send us out on a bit of good news, and that is that in the state of Delaware, where because of the Hearst decision in Florida a few years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court decision basically mandating unanimous juries, that took a number of people off of death row, and well, those cases are still being litigated in Florida. But in Delaware, that caused the Delaware Supreme Court to reevaluate Delaware's death penalty law. I see Sandra Joy is on here from Delaware. Hi, Sandra. And the Delaware Supreme Court threw out their statute and disallowed them, but the statute's still on the books. And the good news here is that we believe that we'll be able to pass legislation in Delaware in the next couple of weeks that will remove that language from the statute. You know, it's very minor in terms of how much of a difference it'll make because there's nobody on Delaware's death row and they're not going to have executions, but it's very symbolic and it's an opportunity for a win. So if you know anybody who lives in Delaware, make sure that they're connecting with their legislators. And we have an action. I'll have to put the link. We'll send out the link to everybody. And it's on our social media regularly. But that's where, I mean, the Delaware Repeal Project and all has actually, there's still Delaware citizens opposed to the death penalty. So you can find them, and maybe Allie can quickly find them, put the link in there in the chat. But the point is that that's an upcoming opportunity for victory. There's a second piece of legislation in Delaware to actually create a constitutional prohibition against the death penalty, similar to what we have in Michigan. I think Michigan is the only state that actually has a constitutional prohibition to the death penalty currently. So that's also on the table. If that has to pass 2 legislative sessions in a row in Delaware to make that happen. But the point is that they're talking about it, and we may or may not be able to get that second one done, but we're pretty sure it's looking good that we'll be able to get the first one done, and that's super exciting. We'll hear more about that when it happens, and we'll be talking about that at the Fast and Vigil. That's one of the things that happens at Starving for Justice. The 31st annual Fast and Vigil to abolish the death penalty is each evening we have a set of speakers, voices of experience on the death penalty who share their stories and their experience. Sent out an email this morning with a list of all of those people, and they'll be up on that webpage soon if they're not already. And we'll be live streaming or sharing videos of those talks probably afterwards in order to make them of higher quality than we get with live streams. But we'll figure that part out. Point is, we're in action. We're doing the work, and only because of you and your support are we able to do it. So we're grateful for that. And that's the other email that went out to some people this evening as a test. We have a new, we actually met the match. Our treasurers in the audience here. So we met the match, the $18,000. Two of our biggest donors matched $18,000, and we raised those $18,000 from lots and lots of people, small donors, people giving anywhere from $2 to $100 or $500, whatever it is. We raised that $18,000. We met the match. It's been tripled. And now tonight we're starting a new one. David Dodge, who's another one of our major donors, has put up $5,000 as a match. So that one's that's in testing right now, but it's coming up. In fact, let me just pop that into the chat real quick. Let's see here. Yeah, I get that up. Gonna have that in a second for you. Yeah, so this is the new, we got $162 so far. So thank you for everybody that's donated there. And here comes that link to take advantage of that map. Oh, so here's the For Whom the Bells Toll. And here's this. And there we are. And with that, let's see, I was asking you to put in the Delaware citizens opposed to the death penalty link. Let me see if I can find that real quick. Delaware citizens. Yeah, we'll send it out. Okay. So, and for people that live in Delaware, write to your members of the legislature. Brant, I see you have a question. So let's just allow you to talk real quick. Brant, go ahead. What's your question?
He was on and oh no, he's back.
All right. Well, thank you all. You can put your question in the chat. We'll get back or email abe@deathpenaltyaction.org. With that, thanks everybody for participating this time. We'll be back with our next let's see. Oh, sorry, Brent hit the wrong button. So that's cool. Thank you. So the next forecast will be we'll get a little break. So it'll be July 7th. Will be the next time we're doing this. So we get a little break in terms of this, but 3 executions, then more in July. And we're grateful to everybody for showing up and for all of your support. So let's just take us out with another little video here. Get back into the web page. And this would be coming from, to get to our front page. Yeah, we'll show Rick Halpern tonight because Rick is one of the co-founders of the annual Fast and Vigil. So if you get down here to the people versus the death penalty, you try it on the front page of the death penalty action and see if I'm getting how my signal is tonight. There we go. So you get all the way back. You can hear from murder victim family member, former executioners, former death row, innocent guys who've been released, the brothers of people on death row, the mother of somebody that's been executed, and in a moment here, just waiting for my screen to load. You can tell these things are unscripted, and we just sort of make sure that we hit all the marks. But for whatever reason, this one, let's see here. We'll reload it. There we go. So this is Rick Halpern, Professor Rick Halpern, a professor of human rights at the Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. And he's a co-founder of the annual Fast and Vigil to abolish the death penalty, which is coming up, 31st annual, coming up at the end of this month.
It's just too easy for people who are looking at this from the outside to go, we got to get rid of the death penalty. It's as American as apple pie and the flag. It's a norm. You're up against 400 plus years of history of entrenchment where the norm, the American mindset is kill them. This country has always loved to punish people. Over 19,000 Americans from colonial America today have been put to death in this country. You know, we've released 191 people who were innocent, and they weren't released because of this system, they were released in spite of it. Any country that has the death penalty and uses it can never be good on human rights. The principles of tolerance, diversity, respect, dignity, rights. Most people in this country have never heard of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. They couldn't even tell you what their own human rights are. There is no such thing as a lesser person. We either fundamentally believe that, or we make excuses why people can be abused, targeted, and killed with our approval or indifference. Because the most fundamental right that anybody in this world has is the right to a life with dignity. It's not just the right to life, it's the right to life with dignity. And when the state sentences people to death, it is a process of physical and psychological terror and torture which debases, degrades, and dehumanizes people and subjects them to abuse before they're killed. And that is a far cry from upholding anybody's dignity. It's arguably one of the most systemically racist institutions in the United States today, bar none. And anybody who supports the death penalty, and I mean political people, not average people that may not know about the death penalty, but if you're a politician and you keep supporting the death penalty as if you're tough on crime, you might as well put a sign around your neck that says, I'm a racist. Because that's what the death penalty is. It is a war against the poor and overwhelmingly a class war against people of color, overwhelmingly.
How does that met out?
You know, African Americans go to death row for killing African Americans the way whites go to death row for killing whites. But white people who are found guilty of crimes against African Americans, homicides, rarely go to death row. They may go to prison. They may go to prison for the rest of their lives, but they're not going to be executed overwhelmingly. But in a death penalty state, if a person of color is convicted of a homicide against a white person, look out, because statistics bear it out state by state by state. They are X amount of times more likely to go to death row in that state because of the skin color of their victim who may have been white. It's just the reality of this country. We are a racist, brutally racist country still. We lived with slavery for 246 years. We lived with segregation for 89 years. Women didn't get the right to vote in this country until 1920. How can this country be good on other social justice issues globally or internally if most people aren't bothered by the fact that we're killing people in the name of the law, making mistakes and using skin color to justify it? It's mind-boggling where we're at here in 2023. It's mind-boggling. infringement